Today we're going to be looking at thermal paste spread and coverage on a Threadripper IHS. We have a cooler on here already, so the plan is to walk through that. This one's from the factory, and so it has the factory installed thermal paste on it. We also have silk screens to show you how the spread will be for different Asetek generation coolers, which will cover most coolers on the market. And then at the end of the video, we'll be walking through installation of the cooler and the installation of the CPU in the socket. But first thing to go through is the thermal compound spread, and then we're also going to be using our new prop that we've put together specifically for the purpose of seeing where the dies are covered and where the thermal mass covers versus something like a traditional die. Before getting to that, this content is brought to you by the Thermaltake Flow RGB closed loop liquid cooler, which is a 360 millimeter radiator plus 3 120 fans that are RGB illuminated. The Thermaltake rain fans at that. This is a 4.5 gen Asetek pump, which is one of the faster pumps. You can learn more at the link in the description below. So the first thing we're going to do is dismount this cooler. These install in a particular order. They are numbered on the mounting bracket. The mounting bracket comes from Asetek. It is supplied with the Threadripper CPUs, and you can see that these two screws are closer together than these two, and they are numbered 1 through 4. So 2, 3, 1, 4 in that order and orientation. Oh, you know what? Before we dismount this, let me show you something else. I'm going to show you memory clearance because we have the go-ahead to show all this stuff today, and we can't show performance numbers. I don't like unboxings. I think they're useless. So instead, we're going to try and show you some useful things. So here's a memory module. I'm going to socket this over here in the closest possible spot. There's a keep out zone on every motherboard, and that means that the manufacturers need to make sure their products clear things. So if you mount really any Asetek cooler of this size and form factor, you'll clear. Even if we had the tubes more this way, we would still clear. I actually specifically changed the bracket orientation on the cooler to make sure that the clearance was not an issue. If you have something like a Kraken series or an EVGA CLC cooler, they are a bit larger and they will start bumping into the larger heat spreaders on memory modules. So be careful what you're using, what motherboard you use, how close it is between the memory socket and the CPU socket. So that shows that. That gets that out of the way. So we're good on this particular unit, but not everything will clear depending on the board and the CPU cooler. They should. They're supposed to, but it doesn't mean they will because some of this stuff is obviously made before Threadripper. Let's remove this in reverse order. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's the order we're going to go for removal. I like to loosen these about 1/2 to 3/4 way, and then I loosen them the rest of the way after that. 2, 1, and you are technically supposed to tighten them in the same order. So you can probably do a bit better. I'm just going to go opposite corners until it's loose. All right, so there we go. Let's go. Let me make sure I'm not going to impact what we see. Oh man, this is my first time actually seeing that, so you're seeing it with me. Okay, so here's what we have. This was installed from the factory, this thermal paste. You can't get too much better than that normally. For something like Threadripper, I'm thinking you might be able to get a bit better than that, but we'll talk about that more in the review when we can actually show some data. So here's our coverage. Now, the question is, and this is something we talked about a lot at the event, the question is, how much does it matter that you're not covering the whole IHS? Clearly the cooler, the thermal paste part is contacting there. The rest of the cooler, we've got a little bit more space, so let's see how much more we have exactly. So out the edges, we've got another, just a rough, quick measurement here. Got like another 10 millimeters you'd go. So how much would that help us out here? I mean, that'd get you most of the way covered. That'd get you like 3/4 covered if this whole thing had compound on it. Now, it doesn't matter though. So here's what the inside of one of these looks like. We've taken a lot of these apart. The part that's important is to have the thermal paste contacting directly under your highest density of copper or your highest thermal mass. And for this unit, that's going to be right here. This is the same cold plate you'll find in the EVGA CLC coolers. You'll find this in the NZXT Kraken coolers, in Corsair's H100i V2, Corsair's H115i, and about 60% of the coolers on the market that are CLCs. So this is what you'll find in all of those. Same thing. It comes from the same supplier. This is an older cold plate. This one is from a much older Cooler Master Sidon cooler, and even with these, although the copper circle at the bottom, the cold plate is larger, the actual density of microfins is about the same on them. So these are good stand-ins for what you can expect for where your thermal mass will be on a cooler. You can look at it here. We've got the, again, this is the exact same as the Thermaltake one for the most part that we've got. So if you kind of line them up, this is what your contact area looks like depending on orientation of the cooler. Either the fins are vertical or they're horizontal, and there is actually an ideal way to do it. Ideally, you have it this way. Now, unfortunately, there's not a great way to know if you're oriented that way or not without opening the thing. Although I guess, actually, for future reference, let's see. No, they are a bit different on these, aren't they? Okay. Well, anyway, theoretically, this would be better than the inverse than that. But yeah, so that's our contact area. Not fantastic, but what actually matters is, as we'll see with this thing here, and here's your unboxing AMD. Here's your media gift where you actually put it to real work. So this thing theoretically is a non-functional Ryzen CPU, an engineering sample. It's a little bit different than the production samples. We drew on it. So this thing, thanks to some measurements we found online, thanks to Der Bauer's video, thanks to known information about Ryzen, which uses the same dies, just this has more of them, we were able to trace things out and figure out where the dies are through the IHS without delidding it. And each die is 8.87 millimeters by 22.01 millimeters, as I understand it today, something like 195 squared, I think. So each of these is 8.87 by 22.01 roughly, and they are offset. Thanks to Der Bauer's video, we were able to figure this out. We actually just superimposed the image on the computer with the CPU, and we were able to trace things out. So the offset is something like 12.5 millimeters inward this way for the die. So from the lawn way, it's 12.5 inward. And then it's about 16 to 16.15 up, or down in this case, and that's where your 4 dies are. So what we care about is what's the coverage over these. Does it cover the dies? And this is what we've been saying the theory of, but we haven't known in practice, and we won't be able to show you the data until launch day. But the theory is that as long as this cold plate covers where the dies are, you should be okay. You don't need to contact the whole IHS to cool. Now, will it be better? Probably. You'll probably have a bit more efficient thermal transfer if you contact all this surface area that's spreading the heat, hence the name IHS, and conduct it through your cold plate. But you don't have to. What you really care about is the hot spots. Let's just take a look at that right now. That is awfully close. So there's your hot spots. They are in fact covered. So, if the theory is correct, the theory being that all you need to do is cover the dies, then you are transferring heat into the cold plate and therefore into the cooler. The part where it gets a little tricky is these outer edges, and only 2 of these are active, mind you. These outer edges are not covered by the microfins, they're just covered by the cold plate, so you're not going to be the most efficient transfer. That means there's room for potential improvement if cooler manufacturers want to come in here and make a better cold plate, and it looks like a few of them have, but not all of them. So 2 of these are active. I have been informed by AMD, and this is public information that we've already published, that the same 2 dies will be active on every Threadripper CPU. So let's just say it's these 2. Those 2 will be the same. It'll always be those 2 on every CPU from what we've been told. And then these 2 are silicon substrate, more or less spacers, we'll call them, that just help with mechanical mounting pressure. Though it does kind of start looking like Epic at that point. So 2 of them are contacted, but yeah, that's what it looks like. Next thing we can do is start showing different, we've got over here actually a whole stack of silk screens, so let's kind of bring that over here. This is what we use to make sure our testing is consistent from one cooler cold plate to another. So this is an EVGA CLC, but it's the same, it's a Gen 4.5 cold plate, and then we've also got, for example, a bag of EVGA's 4.5 cold plates. These are silk screens, by the way, if that wasn't clear. So to apply these, we have a video on it. We lock this to the bottom of the cold plate, do a syringe of thermal paste there, and then use like a spudger to spread it. And then you can get perfect contact just like it's out of the factory. So 4.5 is there. We have Gen 5, which is the current newest. Their Gen 6 is on the way. And then we have Gen 4. Gen 4, a bit older now. Gen 5 is in stuff like the Kraken X2 series, X62, 42, 52, 62. And the coolers where the pumps protrude straight out of the pump block as opposed to hanging off the side like these. So when you see them, the tubes, rather not pumps, the tubes sticking straight out of the block, like some of the Corsair units, the H100 IV2 I believe does it, that's a Gen 5. So let's just go ahead and take a Gen 5 cold plate since we know that those are the most common. And if you were to apply, it's probably going to be about the same spread. Is it? Yeah, it's about the same spread. So Gen 5 will cover the same area as what we're seeing with thermal takes, which is a Gen 4.5 flow. So let's look at this over here, give you an idea of coverage without hopefully ruining our masterpiece. Actually, I'm going to get a cleaner one. Okay, here's an unused one. That way we don't ruin this. So your coverage is really not fantastic. Is the Z dead center? Z is dead center, looking at our grid. So let's just go ahead and orient with the Z. Somewhere around there, work with me, obviously. This is dry erase marker, so I can't do, but somewhere around there. So one thing to point out here is that the center of the thermal mass of the cold plate is actually situated over nothing. So the normally hottest spot of the CPU is going to probably be around the middle of the cold plate, but because this is 4 dies that are segmented with nothing in dead center, the cooler is actually sitting over that dead center area, and that's not even a hot spot. So your most efficient point of thermal transfer and dissipation is not really going to be leveraged with these coolers on these CPUs. It is not necessarily a fault of the cooler design or of the CPU design. It's just a byproduct of the two not necessarily being ideal for each other. So no one's really at fault here. You could just do a bit better though. So the hot spots will be on the dies, so top left, bottom right, or bottom left, top right, depending on which ones are active. Those will be your 2 hot spots, and those are at the perimeter, or the periphery of the cooler, the cold plate. So they're actually going to be less efficiently cooled than if you were cooling something dead center like a traditional single die CPU for desktop. So that's something to point out. How much it matters, again, we'll test it. I keep saying that, but it's important to say not to jump to any conclusions right now until we can test it and publish the data. I mean, again, you're looking at the cold plate making contact and covering the dies, just barely, just like a millimeter, barely covering them. The thermal compound won't make full contact. You might want to go in there and add some more if you feel so inclined. That might improve your thermal contact. Let's look at a Gen 4. Here's a Gen 4, not a big difference between these in terms of the contact area. So I'm thinking it's going to be about the same. Yeah, about the same. So if we can kind of get this on camera, the silk screen is imperfect, but the circle for the thermal paste is pretty close to it. It's roughly around there. So what you're seeing is, use this as a pointer, you're seeing is the die right here feeds out to this area. So this is the border horizontally and vertically. So we're not covering with the thermal compound, but we'll cover it with the cold plate once again. How much that matters, we'll find out soon, but we don't know today or can't tell you today. So as you can see, the only point of concern here, well, aside from not having full IHS contact, which may or may not be irrelevant as we'll learn in the review, hopefully, the main point of concern is where these screw holes are. You're gonna have some hot spots because contact is not perfect. These are indented a bit, so you're not getting copper contact, you'll get a screw contact, and if you go through it and add more thermal paste, you'll at least have a thermal interface there. Otherwise, this is actually indented, and there will be a small pocket of air and a hot spot on the particular part of the die that corresponds to the hole. So we can kind of lift this up a bit, and you'll see, we can see down to part of the die. So it is imperfect. There will be some slight hot spots. We would encourage at least adding some thermal paste where the screw holes are so that you can get transfer up somewhat to the cold plate, but just be aware of that. And we can't really comment on how performance is until we've tested it properly. So all that in mind, may be an issue, may not be an issue. And then Gen 4.5, we've kind of already showed with the thermal take cooler. So that's what we're looking at for coverage. Let's take the Threadripper CPU out of the motherboard and walk you through that process without dropping the media sample off the table. So for this, again, let me just kind of wrap this up. We'll talk more about this coverage in the future. It's coming, but not today. In the very least, you have an idea of what to expect for Asetek cooler coverage on these. They will clearly not cover the entire area, and actually, let's just go ahead and kind of line this up to show you. Good enough. It's not being tested right now. Okay, good enough. So, yeah, let's just go ahead and do this one more time. There you go. There's your coverage, plain and simple, with things fairly centered, more or less. So there's a lot of room here for cooler manufacturers to do something interesting with Threadripper. In all theory, this should be fine. I'll do the air quotes there. It should be acceptable. That doesn't mean it'll be the best. Doesn't mean it'll be optimal, but it should work because you are in fact covering the dies. So we should be good in that regard, but it doesn't mean it's optimal. So to release this thing, I said we'd show how this works. There are 3 Torx screws. I think they are TR20. It's a 1.5 Newton meter Torx wrench included. Torque wrench, that is Torx, to be clear. To remove the thing, you go 3, 2, 1. To add it, or to close it rather, you go 1, 2, 3, and these are labeled 1, 2, 3, VRM oriented up, 1, 2, 3, and because it's a torque wrench, that means when you close it, I'll just demo it for you, when we completely bottom out the torque, we'll get a click. Here it comes. And it'll fight you. So once you hit that, you can't go any further. This is actually really good on AMD's part. I am appreciative that they have made it plain and simple exactly how much force you can apply to these things. So if you do lose this wrench that comes with it, it's 1.5 Newton meters, or if you prefer, that's 13.3 inch-pounds. And I think a TR20, double check me, but I think that's what it is. So we remove that. You get blue latches under here. Make some room. So blue latches, apply light upward force, same process for adding the thing, springs forward, pull the orange tab, comes out, there's your socket. This orange housing is meant to stay on the CPU. Do not remove it, do not throw it away, you'll need it. So that exposes the pins and more or less gives us an idea of how everything goes together. Now if you want to install it too, you basically would, well, where's our socket cover? I can show you exactly how it goes. So here's how it ships. Ships with one of these covering the LGA socket, something like that. Just make sure I'm not pinching pins. Okay. You should keep that in case you ever need to close it up again to protect it. And for RMA purposes, you will need it. And then this slides in or out through there. So when you get the thing, it'll look like this. And then you loosen them, 3, 2, 1, springs forward. It'll be like that. You release this. And then this, do not push from the back. You'll break something. Pull this tab up here, slide it out, and then at that point, you can insert and socket the Threadripper CPU like this. It slides right in. Orange tabs should meet the black at the bottom, and then you remove your socket cover very last to protect it till the last moment. Push down if you're socketed correctly, which we are, and it sockets, and then you go 1, 2, 3, and close it. So that's what it looks like. That's the Threadripper CPU, rapid installation, but more focus again was on this aspect of things. And if we were to mount a bunch of coolers to this, all the Asetek ones will look the same. So what you're interested in it is, what does it look like when you get some special like Noctua cooler? They've got those new air coolers coming, and you mount one of those to here with the larger cold plate. Well, it should look like the whole thing's covered. And theoretically, that's better. In practice, we'll try to find out. A/B testing with coolers like that, you need 2 different cold plates. We'll try to get something arranged, but at the very least, we know that Asetek coolers will cover that die area. You will not get full IHS contact. You don't necessarily need it, but it's probably nice to have. Stay tuned for our review though. We'll show you how much, if at all, it actually matters compared to something with fuller contact. And I think we have some plans on how to simulate that in a way that is realistic enough to give you an idea of what one of these would look like if it had full contact, because we've worked with these enough, torn them down enough to have the resources to do so. So that is the CPU installation and walkthrough of the cold plate, cooler installation, all that stuff. If you wanted to install a cooler, it's got the 4 screws, just like I said a moment ago. You just socket it down, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're done. Make sure the closer ones are at the top near the VRMs. And for today, this is all we can show you. So AMD has approved that we can show you the CPU installation and we can show you cooler installation. And as an addendum of cooler installation, we showed you cooler coverage and contact area. So thank you for watching. As always, you can go to patreon.com/gamersnexus to help us out directly. Subscribe for more to make sure you don't miss our Threadripper reviews when they go up. gamersnexus.squarespace.com for a shirt like this one. This is the anniversary edition shirt. It's brand new. And I'll see you all next time.